Hey, what's going on, guys? Indy here with Ultimate Tour Reviews. We're taking a look at the 2000 Tacoma again today. So we had a bit of an issue going on recently, and I finally was able to diagnose it as an EGR issue. Two things were happening that were giving me some really weird stuff. The first thing that was going on was all of a sudden when it was cold out, it would give me this really weird issue where it didn't want to go. It would seem like it would just kind of stall, and you'd kind of put the gas down, and it would just kind of go like it did not want to go at all. And that was kind of strange, which that can be a number of different things, can cause, acceleration issues at cold, which some of them can be your engine's going, which a little scary on that one. But I was doing some research on some stuff. I replaced a few different things. I replaced the throttle position sensor, which actually did fix my high idle. So that's kind of cool. High idle can be caused from a bunch of different things. Now, one thing that one person said to check was check and see if your EGR valve is stuck for some reason. Now, I did have a check engine light on. I did not have one on at all. So I'm like, must not be the EGR. That actually I did not know can be wrong. You can actually have EGR issues and not throw a check engine light. It did end up throwing a check engine light about a day later, though, which is fantastic. It showed me that, hey, yes, it showed me the EGR excessive flow code. I think it's like an 0204 code, I think it was. And so I'm like, okay, it's EGR. So what I did is on the back of the EGR, I unbolted two bolts. I'll show you guys those in just a second. I kind of opened up that gap bit. So the EGR, so the engine would not need to pull from the EGR then. So there's a bit of an air gap there. So now even if that EGR valve is closed, it can still pull in fresh air, which I don't really recommend doing. I was doing that just to test that out for about a week or so. You don't want to be pulling unfiltered air in the engine, of course, but I wanted to see, was there another issue causing this? Was I getting a misfire? Was something else happening? Was the coil pack going wrong? Something else was causing the issue. I want to make sure that that was not the case. So what I did was I opened the EGR up a little bit, and I kept running it every day, no matter how cold it was. The issue never returned. Of course, the check engine light stayed on. So that leaves me to two options. Do I start replacing parts in the EGR system, or do I just do an EGR delete? And for me, doing EGR delete is actually the way to go, because this truck is not registered nor insured. It's purely a farm truck. So I don't want to spend a bunch of money fixing an EGR system that may or may not fix it for something that is going to be only really detrimental to using it. Now, that's a bit of controversial there. Does the EGR system actually help your engine? Does it actually give you a few other different little things here? Run cooler, etc., of course. From my research, though, from what I've seen, people are deleting them all the time, and there's really no consequences at all. So I figured, why not? I'll delete mine too. No big deal. So I got a EGR delete kit, which you can, in fact, buy these separately. It's not like it's crazy parts by any chance, but I got it from yodashop.com, and they're actually quite helpful. They're not sponsored the video or anything, but I paid for it myself. It was $46.57. That's with shipping, of course. And here is the complete list. So you want to do it yourself, here's what you're going to need. You're going to, of course, need the EGR plates. I got the 2.4, the 2RZ. It's a 2000. They got the plates for both. You want to also do the 2.7. So they do make a couple different kits for that. They do give you the resistors. You get a 5.7K resistor, 5.7 it's K ohms, so it's 1,000 ohms. Then you got the 10,000 or the 10K resistor. So you got a couple different options here, and they tell you which one you should use, which one you should not use, of course. And then they give you a diagram on how to install that resistor into that plug. I'm going to be doing probably a two-part video on this because I've never done this before, and I am just kind of figuring this out as I go on this one. Now, they did send me over a diagram of the EGR system. So, of course, you can delete this if you want to. I am not going to fully remove the system. I just want to get the check engine light gone and, of course, get the valve disconnected from the engine block itself, or the intake there, because I don't want that thing interfering with the engine anymore. So I believe that should be relatively easily. My goal is not to just rip the entire thing out of there. I want to kind of keep it intact as best I can, but not having it give me any issues like it's doing right now. So that's going to be my goal here. So first things first, I want to make sure that I have the right cover plate here. And then, of course, we have the right resistors. Also in the box here is going to be a vacuum cap, because you're going to be capping up a couple of vacuum lines as well. I'm going to do that regardless, even though I'm not really taking the lines off, just because I want to make sure that I'm not having any vacuum leaks, because those are a pain in the butt to hunt down. I have had some of those issues so far. As you can see, my engine bay is blue because I had a couple of vac leaks already. As I'm placing hoses, I put the blue hoses in so I can tell exactly which hoses I am replacing. Now, of course, you can make these yourself. You don't need to necessarily buy them from the Yoda shop. You just need basically a piece of metal, something that's somewhat thick, and then you're going to bolt that back on to, of course, cap off that on the intake there. So that's also an option there too. And these are actually pretty nice, which work out pretty well here. We do have, of course, a gasket here as well too. Actually, this looks like off like a little like a 212, little Predator 212 gasket here on the exhaust. Working on mini bikes quite a while there. All right, so here are the resistors. We got the 5.7 and the 10K here. And thanks to Vivor for sponsoring this video, sending over a couple of the flex head ratcheting wrenches. They're going to be super handy on this project here, as some of this stuff is kind of far back in the engine bay and kind of hard to reach. So these should come in nice and handy for this. Let's check out the engine bay, see what we're working with here. All right, so I know this is going to be a little tricky to see here because it's kind of far back in the engine bay, but our EGR system is going to be right here where I'm pointing right there. It's kind of dark back there, but basically this is the top of your EGR system here, and so we're going to want to cap off here. So let's get to work kind of pulling some of this stuff out of here and trying to, of course, get down to the EGR system here. Kind of going to do the best we can to get down there. All right, so we got this part off now. So of course this is going to be your exhaust side, or they call it the exhaust plenum. Intake plenum is right here. This is where our first little block off part is going right here. It's going to connect onto these two. We're going to block off the intake right here. Of course, I'm pulling off the vac lines on the intake. Your vac lines here, these, this is your vac line here. This is going to need, of course, to plug back in. I just unplug this one, goes over to here, just so I have better access. But the little ones here, these can just be blocked off. You can just put some vac line back on these and just cap them off, really. You at least want to put something on them so they don't get debris in there or anything crazy. I'm still trying to find out what to do with this right here. There is two coolant lines that run on this. I'm going to figure that out here in just a second. And then, of course, we want to remove the exhaust right here. That pipe actually goes underneath the engine and it comes out on the other side. Let me show you that over here. Right down there, it connects into the exhaust manifold. Kind of hard to see down there, but you can definitely get to it. There's actually quite a bit of space there. So I can pull that off no problem. And then it does clip back somewhere in the back of the engine too. I need to get the bolt back there and hopefully get that off here. All right, guys, I think I got the hardest part done, which is the exhaust side. So this clip, actually, you don't actually need to unbolt that. You can just kind of pull it apart and just slide the pipe right out. Not a big deal. Hardest part, though, I will say by far, let me grab the light here, is getting to these bolts down here. You can see them actually a lot nicer now that the pipe is out of the way. Let me get this down there for you. You can see those two bolts right back in there. It is really hard to see, right? Those two bolts right there. The bottom one is a little bit more rusted than the top one was, which was the problem there. And I got the cap on there now, so that's capped off. The top one, not too bad. I was able to get that one pretty easily. But the bottom one, that was the tricky one. So once you get that off, I was able to get it broken loose from the bottom, starting from that way, and then I was able to finally get it off with one of those ratcheting wrenches from the top side. That took forever. But now I'm actually getting to the sensor here, which I can show you that from the top of the engine bay. It's actually the little cable. It is right back here. This is the cable that plugs right into your intake. I know it's a little hard to see here, but right there goes your intake, and then it's right here. I've seen a couple of videos of guys removing the entire sensor entirely. You don't want to do that. You want to keep that sensor right there, and then I'm going to plug that 10K resistor in there to trick my check engine light into thinking that the EGR is still working. Still need to figure out a way to do something with this to get rid of the coolant lines in there, but that can almost just stay right there for now, so that's not going to hurt anything. Staying right there at this point. So once I figure out a solution for that, I can then take care of that, no problem. But I'm gonna get that resistor in there, shouldn't be too bad. And then of course, either want to solder it in there, put some electrical tape around that to make sure that thing stays in place. Well, that's not too bad up to this point. I got the other cap on right there. As you can see, that is the EGR intake plenum there, or basically the intake. That's finally capped off. Also, I found down here, it's actually gonna be right there. See that green connector right there? That's where you're gonna have two of the other little vac lines, or just EGR lines connected right there. That connector, of course, you wanna keep plugged in because you're gonna wanna have this connector up here. As you can see, I've got my resistor all set in there. Let me see if I can get that to There we go. Yeah, right there's my resistor. I'm just gonna put the electrical tape over that. So I'm gonna do a part 2 on this because I want to make sure I can figure out something to do with those coolant lines. But here's my exhaust lines. Here's a bunch of those lines for the EGR lines there. A couple of the old gaskets, of course, I pulled those off. This was the, I forget the exact name of this thing. I'll put in the comments when I find out what this thing is called, of course. But I'm gonna do a part 2, guys. Of course, I clean everything up in the engine bay and finally remove that EGR valve as well, too. And so I'll either cap off the coolant lines or we'll just put them together somehow, or run them together. That's what I want to do there. So I'll put a part 2 up, guys, when I figure all of that out. But at least right now, the EGR is deleted. Everything is connected out as it should be. Resistor's on, so check-in light is going to go away now. That's exactly what I was trying to do today, was get all that eliminated. Not necessarily clean up 100%, but it's now runs and drives. No problems now. That was the goal. And before I go, guys, just wanted to show that, yep, we got the check engine light off there nicely. We are showing no other codes here, and then just warming up the engine now, making sure I'm not leaking any coolant out of the EGR valve, because of course I messed around with that valve a little bit, kind of wiggling it around there to get it off there. Want to make sure the truck runs good and everything too. No issues at all with how the truck is running right now. I'm going to pull it back in if it warms up, make sure that EGR valve is not leaking any coolant at all, and then I want to figure out a way how to, of course, you know, so I'll put those two coolant lines together so we don't need to worry about the EGR valves banging around the engine bay, of course. So guys, thanks for watching.